Do you rely on God for everything in your life? For emergencies, for daily decisions? What about for the water you use every day? Water that keeps you hydrated and the grass green and the dogs clean. Do you think of Him as you turn on the tap for your toothbrush every morning? You should be doing that every morning, by the way. And thank Him as you take a sip out of a water bottle? Now, water is something that we all acknowledge as a basic need, especially here in the desert of western Colorado. But how often do we actually consider where it comes from? Probably not as often as we should, and certainly not as often as the people of Jesus' time did. In the ancient Middle East, water was scarce, and they didn't have the technology to harvest water like we do today. It's likely that the people living there considered the source of their water daily, even though that source varied depending on which part of the Middle East they lived in. In Egypt, water was synonymous with the Nile River and human effort. Rain was infrequent, so in order to water their crops, Egyptians would divert the river to flood their fields. For their livestock and household needs, they hauled the water from the Nile by hand, sometimes multiple times a day. Actually, while the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, they hauled the water and flooded the crops for the Egyptians. But when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, he started them on a journey back to the land of milk and honey. And in that land, water came not from human effort or a river, but from God. In Israel, there is a different source of water. The Egyptians created gods for the Nile River, but our God created living water for the Israelites. Rain brought life to the barren hills and fields of Israel where human effort could never supply enough water to keep things green. These rains and the food they provided reminded the Israelites daily of their dependence on the God of Abraham and the blessings He gave to them. This idea of living water was so embedded in the Israelites' DNA that when the prophets wanted to explain God's promised blessings, they often returned to the metaphor of living water. Centuries later, when Jesus stood before the Jewish people of the last day of the Feast of the Tabernacles, He declared, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink." The Jewish people and leaders knew exactly what He was saying. God was once again asking His people to rely on Him. Only this time, He was asking them to drink the waters of eternal life. He was asking you to drink those waters. So let me ask you again, do you rely on God for all the water in your life? Now, time for our questions out of chapter 7. Now again, we like to read a question, put it on the screen where someone in your group or yourself can pause the video and take a few minutes to discuss the question together. Then hit play again and move on to the next one. Okay, this week's first question. In verses 37 to 38, Jesus calls all of us who are thirsty to come to Him so that our hearts will flow with living water. What does the metaphor living water mean, and why does Jesus use it in reference to Himself? Question number 2. Would your friends say you are an example of living water in the way you live your life? Why or why not? Okay, before the last question, just a quick reminder and encouragement to keep following along in the John Series study guide. The Part 2 guide is available at the sign-up desk in the lobby at church or on the John Series page at canyonviewchurch.com. It's a great way for us all to be learning together what God would have for us through this series. I personally love the daily reading segments. It's a great way to start my day reading from the Bible. Anyway, here we go. Last question. I want you to read Ezekiel 47, 1 through 5. How can you apply the concept of the gospel spreading to your own life and walk with Jesus?